تحكم أمريكا بالأمن.
ليس لهم عندنا إلا السيف البتار.
Iraq today harbors a deadly terrorist network headed by Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. Abu Musab
استوحى لقبه من المدينة التي ولد فيها.
This narrative unveils the formidable story of Abu Musab Al Zarqawi, an individual whose moniker derives from his place of birth. What follows is a compelling account of a man who journeyed from humble beginnings in Zarqa to becoming the world's most wanted figure. Al Zarqawi's transformation is nothing short of astounding. Born as Ahmed al-Khalela and raised in the unassuming Mansour neighborhood, he evolved into a global menace described by the European Union as Earth's most dangerous person. This status was underscored by an unprecedented bounty. An American president offered $25 million for information leading to his capture. This story, until now untold and unseen by any audience, commands your full engagement. The deeper you delve into this video, the more profound your astonishment will be. By watching uninterruptedly to its conclusion, you may find yourself compelled to pause and reflect deeply on what has transpired for a considerable period afterward. I encourage you to mark your approval by liking this video as we embark on this extraordinary journey together. Let us proceed. Several years ago, a young boy named Ahmed Khalela resided in the Zarqa region, specifically in the Musab neighborhood. At that time, Ahmed was merely 15 or 16 years old. He belonged to an ordinary family with his father serving as a committed member of the Jordanian army for his entire life until he retired after 3 decades of service. Ahmed was positioned as the middle child among 8 siblings, 7 sisters and 1 brother. The family's financial situation grew dire following their father's death, which significantly amplified their expenses. Despite still being in his teenage years, Ahmed's responsibilities burgeoned drastically due to the necessity of providing for his 7 sisters. Their poverty reached such an extreme that there were days when they could not secure any food at all. At nearly 16 years old, with no clear direction or resources, Ahmed abruptly found himself shouldering immense responsibilities without knowing how to navigate this profound burden placed upon him. Ahmed's situation necessitates substantial expenditure, as he is unable to alter his circumstance. Initially, Ahmed alternated between working a week and then for a month when work was available. Now 17 years old, Ahmed faced an unfortunate reality. The year he should have enrolled in high school turned out otherwise. Despite his academic prowess, attending high school meant relinquishing work and subsequently failing to support his siblings, both financially dependent sisters and a brother. Acknowledging this harsh truth, Ahmed resolved not to pursue higher education. He prioritized employment over schooling solely for the purpose of sustaining his family's financial needs. In his early years, Ahmed aspired to complete high school and attend Wada University with the ambition of following in his father's footsteps by joining the Jordanian army. However, financial constraints overshadowed these dreams and ambitions. Consequently, Ahmed abandoned education altogether in favor of continuous attempts to secure better-paying jobs than those he previously held, all while facing persistent adversity due to pervasive poverty and an unfavorable environment. Despite holding jobs which scarcely covered basic rental costs, Ahmed bore immense responsibility for supporting a large family burdened with expenses beyond their means. Ahmed, a young man of 17 years, faced significant challenges as the primary provider for his large family. Living in the Musab neighborhood, an area plagued by socioeconomic issues and criminal influences, offered little positive reinforcement or guidance. Due to these environmental pressures, Ahmed found himself increasingly drawn into criminal activities. The area's pervasive crime culture made it almost inevitable for youth like him to encounter others on a similar path. Lacking any constructive influence or mentorship, Ahmed's initial steps into crime were marked by relatively minor offenses such as intimidating unarmed individuals to steal their phones and money or being hired to settle conflicts through threats. Despite this troubling start, it was evident that Ahmed's actions stemmed from desperation rather than hardened criminal intent. In an environment where survival necessitated harsh choices and where supportive figures were painfully absent, his trajectory might have been different if he had encountered someone capable of offering guidance and support. If circumstances had been different, this video might not exist. However, Ahmed continued to tread a dangerous path, his actions gradually escalating until he became deeply entangled in serious criminal activities including drug trafficking and significant thefts. His offenses grew more severe, culminating in attempted murder and illegal arms dealing. As Ahmed's criminal endeavors expanded, his notoriety within the region increased rapidly. At just 17 years old, Ahmed transitioned from being an ordinary teenager into one of the most feared criminals in the area, a name invoked by parents as a warning to their children: do not associate with him. Ahmed's rise in infamy was brought to an abrupt halt when law enforcement conducted a raid that led to his capture. Subsequently, he was sentenced by a judge to 3 years imprisonment. Yet this is merely where the story begins, for although it was Ahmed al-Khalela who entered prison, it was Musab Al Zarqawi who emerged upon release. Allow me to elucidate how such a transformation occurred. Typically, when an individual is incarcerated, they encounter other criminals, forming alliances and friendships that often lead to a deeper involvement in criminal activities. Upon release, many return to their illicit ways, resulting in a cycle of crime and reincarceration that continues until the end of their life. However, Ahmed's experience was markedly different. Incarcerated at a young age, Ahmed reflected on his life choices and realized that the path he had taken did not align with how he was raised. He recognized that his father would be deeply disappointed by his current situation. This realization struck him profoundly as he observed fellow inmates, some who began their criminal journeys at the same age as Ahmed but were much older now and entrenched deeper in crime. Determined not to follow this destructive pattern, Ahmed decided to distance himself from those influences within prison walls. Resolute in his commitment to change, he stated emphatically, "I do not want to become like these people." His story serves as a powerful testament against resigning oneself to an ongoing life of crime. So he didn't. He found other people besides the sheiks who were not criminals. You know, in every prison in the world, there are those involved in financial crimes, and there are also sheiks with normal records. There was a room where sheiks were imprisoned for cases of extremism and terrorism. Ahmed was an 18-year-old who had never heard of the word terrorism before this time. He didn't know what extremism meant, and he had no idea about these things. However, he noticed that there were sheiks who grew beards, and he believed they must be better than the criminals. Muhammad thought these sheiks were the light at the end of the tunnel. He wanted to meet the sheiks, return to his faith, and become authentic and righteous. He believed that if his father, may God have mercy on him, had seen him, he would have been proud. Muhammad distanced himself from the criminals and only associated with the sheiks in prison. These sheiks were already imprisoned for terrorism and extremism cases because of their ideas. If these ideas spread throughout society, it would be a disaster. Unfortunately, folks, Ahmed sat with these sheiks for 3 years and was completely brainwashed by them. Imagine an 18-year-old boy surrounded by sheiks imprisoned for terrorism and extremism cases, with these experienced sheiks brainwashing him every day for 3 years. Ahmed went to prison, and after 3 years, he came out as Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. When he came out of prison, everyone was surprised. This was a new person, not the Ahmed they knew. This was not the Ahmed who used to get drunk and steal. This was a calm, elegant, and tidy person who feared God. After prison, Ahmed changed all his friends, distancing himself from his old group of criminals. He became very committed, wearing nothing but traditional Islamic clothing, and he memorized the Quran completely. He spent all his time in the mosque, to the point that he founded a group to reach out to the criminal youth who were once his companions. I will not hide from you that the whole region was happy with Ahmed. He was once seen as a major criminal, but thank God, he turned into a committed, religious, and moral person. Mothers who had previously forbidden their children from associating with Ahmed were now allowing them to spend time with him for God's sake. Ahmed became a role model for the entire area where he lived. Fathers would sit with their wayward sons and use Ahmed as an example, saying, "He was once like you, but look at him now. God willing, I hope you become like him." However, unfortunately, Ahmed had been deeply influenced by the ideas of the terrorist sheiks he was imprisoned with. They had completely brainwashed him for 3 years, indoctrinating him with their extremist beliefs. After transforming from Ahmed to Abu Musab Al Zarqawi, he became convinced that 95% of the Jordanian people had to die because they were infidels. He believed it was his duty to kill them one by one. Anyone wearing jeans was considered an infidel, and he felt he must kill them. Any girl not wearing a hijab had to be killed immediately, according to his beliefs. Although he was not able to carry out these violent acts, he openly expressed these ideas in front of others. His family, relatives, friends, and the people in the area all began to understand Ahmed's radical transformation. People began to understand how Ahmed thinks. He was not just a young man committed to praying and fearing God, he held extremist ideologies. If he even attempted to implement 1% of his ideas, it would be a disaster. For Ahmed, the entire community, including his family, were infidels who deserved to die immediately. Unfortunately, Ahmed decided to transition from merely having these extremist ideas to attempting to implement them. For him, adhering to his extremist beliefs meant that those who didn't share them deserved to die. However, he faced a problem: Jordan was not a fertile environment for such actions. The Jordanian intelligence services, among the strongest in the world, would never leave him unchecked. If he had tried to act on his beliefs, he would have been stopped immediately, especially since the Jordanian intelligence had their eyes on him after he was released from prison. He was restricted and unable to implement his ideas. Although he had done nothing illegal yet, the authorities knew he could act at any moment. One day, Ahmed disappeared from Jordan. His family, friends, and the community were all searching for him, but no one could find him. Eventually, they discovered he was in Afghanistan, which was at war with Russia at the time. For Ahmed, Afghanistan was a war zone where he could kill infidels. He wanted to implement his ideas anywhere in the world. Ultimately, he was killed, ending his pursuit of these extremist goals. Unfortunately, Ahmed arrived too late in Afghanistan. By the time he got there, Russia had already withdrawn, and the war was over. He did not participate in any fighting, or there was no war to fight in. However, Ahmed had a strong desire to kill the infidels, as he called them, and he participated in the fighting. Having been influenced by these ideas for years, he wanted to grab a weapon and attack people. A sheikh taught him that anyone who did not wear a dishdasha and grow a beard should be killed. These were the ideas he wanted to implement. During his time in Afghanistan, he spent his days training in weapons handling, making explosives, and smuggling explosives. He also built a network of like-minded individuals. After completing all his training and preparations, he decided to return to Jordan to implement his plans. For Abu Musab Al Zarqawi, anyone who does not adhere to his extremist views is an infidel who deserves death. His goal was to target 90% of Jordanians and implement his violent plans. Jordanian intelligence had been monitoring all his activities and movements, inside and outside Jordan, since his release from prison, without his knowledge. When he tried to return to Jordan from Afghanistan, he was arrested with a large cache of weapons and explosives. They could have caused massive destruction in Jordan had it not been for the intervention of the intelligence services. Thanks to the vigilance and efforts of Jordanian intelligence, a major disaster was avoided. At that time, if you were a Jordanian citizen, the victim could have been a member of your family, a member of my family, or, God forbid, anyone else. The amount of explosives seized was enough to carry out operations in every region of Jordan. After his arrest, a sentence was issued against him, and he was returned to prison. His second period in prison was a turning point for Ahmed, or Abu Musab Al Zarqawi, because it was much more dangerous than the first. During his first imprisonment, Ahmed was influenced by the ideas of the terrorist sheiks. However, during his second imprisonment, Ahmed began recruiting people, brainwashing the largest number of prisoners, just as it had happened to him years before. This time, Abu Musab Al Zarqawi decided to make these prisoners his soldiers and form his first terrorist cell inside the prison. Ahmed turned into a symbol of jihad and a role model for all prisoners because he was among a large group of criminals. Suddenly, they found someone wearing Islamic dress, memorizing the entire Holy Quran, and giving sermons every day. Al-Zarqawi's popularity grew in prison to the point that he could incite a full prison mutiny with just one word. In just one word, he commanded all the prisoners to return to their cells, and everything returned to normal. Ahmed Bassam al-Din gained complete control over every prisoner under his command. After many years, King Abdullah issued a general amnesty decree for all Jordanian prisoners, regardless of their crimes. Most prisoners were released, including Ahmed and many who had been radicalized in prison. Ahmed emerged from prison with a large group of followers he had recruited inside. They immediately began planning how to kill the largest number of infidels in Jordan. Their plan involved bombing numerous hotels in Amman during the New Year celebrations. They spent months preparing explosives and meticulously planning the operation. However, Jordanian intelligence uncovered their plans. Many of Ahmed's group members were arrested, but Ahmed managed to escape to Afghanistan once again. In Afghanistan, he met leaders who shared his extremist ideology. He convinced them to support him with money, weapons, and recruits to establish a terrorist group. His vision was to recruit young men from across the Arab world and lead them in launching their operations. So guys, he established his first camp inside Afghanistan and took advantage of the fact that during that period, many young people were brainwashed because of the media that was in place at the time and because of the lack of awareness that was on the part of people in general were able to get a large number of Jordanian youth and Arab youth in general to join under his leadership. After he brought them, he spent months under training and supervision. I don't want to shock you, dear follower, but it was the beginning of Al-Qaeda, which was later known as ISIS after the organization was fully established. And the youth were established and trained, and they became in very large numbers, and they had money, weapons, and everything. He found that his presence in Afghanistan was unnecessary, because, quite simply, Afghanistan was sincere in war and did not have anything to strive for, and Abu Musab Al Zarqawi and all the young men with him were brainwashed and had a very open appetite for killing. So they were taken. The decision was to move all their group and every active group and go to Iraq. Iraq at that time, guys, was in a state of war and a state of very great chaos, and there was sectarianism, and the law did not exist. For these exact reasons, Abu Musab Al Zarqawi chose Iraq. Because no country in the world could. He enters it and carries out all his activities other than Iraq at the time. Iraq is in a state of war in Iraq, there is sectarianism in Iraq, there are many problems with transportation to Iraq, and from Iraq they have begun to carry out operations everywhere in the world. Bombings everywhere. The number of victims is very large. Every day the organization continues to grow, become stronger, and become more ferocious in numbers. With the proliferation of operations, the organizers became more dangerous, and in a very short time they were able to reach every spot in the world. Bombings in America, operations in France, all of Europe is under danger. Even the Arab world was not spared. The Shiites in Iraq were sitting there. Explosions occurred daily in Amman, with operations extending into Kuwait and other regions. These actions were part of the organization's activities that instilled a profound sense of fear globally. Despite a united international effort to combat this threat, eradication proved elusive. For every 100 operatives killed, another 500 would emerge. The only definitive measure taken was the elimination of Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. Within just a few years, Ahmed, then a young man residing in Zarqa, found himself responsible for his family while simultaneously becoming the most wanted individual on the planet. The President of the United States even offered an unprecedented $25 million reward for any information leading to his capture or death, the highest bounty ever recorded in American history at that time. Abu Musab Al Zarqawi thus became a central figure, with the entire world focused intently on bringing him down. He sought any intelligence you could provide, despite the fact that all global intelligence agencies had combined efforts to halt Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. Nonetheless, Al Zarqawi's influence was growing with each passing day. His forces were swelling in numbers continuously, and his operations were extending to new territories. Virtually every head of state worldwide publicly addressed this escalating threat. In response, Jordan rescinded his citizenship and issued an order for his execution. The entire nation of America anxiously awaits updates concerning Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. The Arab world is in upheaval, yearning for an end to this nightmare. Europe stands on the edge, anticipating the aftermath of his actions that have reverberated across continents. Al Zarqawi's operations have left no region untouched. He has targeted military forces from Britain and Russia and even orchestrated an attack on the Jordanian embassy in Amman. In Iraq, Shiites bore devastating blows due to his brutal tactics. His influence extends far beyond isolated incidents. He has marked territories both west and east with suffering. Astonishingly, this individual once labored quietly in a bakery before seeking better employment opportunities, a journey culminating unexpectedly in becoming the world's most wanted man. How did such a profound transformation occur? Merely years ago, he was a young man supporting his family financially. Today, global intelligence agencies tirelessly pursue him. The President of the United States finds no rest because of him. Protests erupt in Britain due to his actions. Countless Iraqis are displaced by his deeds. Shiite families mourn their losses inflicted by him just as Sunni Muslims experience similar devastations at his hands. No sect or group remains unscathed by Al Zarqawi's relentless campaign of terror and violence. Abu Musab Al Zarqawi was ultimately betrayed by a member of his own group, driven by the promise of a $25 million American reward. This betrayal allowed American intelligence to locate and swiftly eliminate him. It might seem that with Al Zarqawi's death, the story concludes. Indeed, many believe that eradicating him would signify the end of terrorism. However, this event marked only the beginning. To global astonishment, following Al Zarqawi's demise, multiple successors took over his organization. Each new leader proved more ruthless than the last. As one figure fell, another rose in greater extremity and violence. Al-Qaeda continued its operations unabatedly. It not only targeted presidents but also escalated its ambitions until it evolved into what came to be known as ISIS, a name now notorious worldwide. ISIS seized territories in Syria and Iraq and proclaimed its own state. One must contemplate how an individual from Zarqa could establish such a formidable organization with aspirations for statehood. Even at its zenith, ISIS faced unprecedented opposition when nearly all international military forces united against it for the first time in history to ensure its eradication. Eventually, and not without difficulty, the joint efforts succeeded in dismantling ISIS's grip on power. With this coordinated effort concluded effectively, so too ended Abu Musab Al Zarqawi's legacy permanently. I believe it is imperative to address a crucial matter to prevent the emergence of another figure akin to Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. It is alarming how one individual, driven by misguided and false beliefs, can wreak havoc on a global scale, drawing the entire world into turmoil. This tragic scenario originated from deeply held convictions that lacked any foundation in truth. These concepts have played a role in some challenging moments in Earth's history, yet they highlight an intriguing simplicity. The many words that Ahmed al-Khalili heard from another deeply influenced his journey, ultimately transforming him into Abu Musab Al Zarqawi. This evolution wasn't sudden but has been thoroughly documented over time. It beautifully underscores this fundamental truth: your mind is akin to your body. When you nourish it with positive thoughts and carefully chosen ideas, you cultivate mental health, resilience, and clarity. Conversely, if you ignore self-care and indiscriminately absorb negative influences and harmful ideas, it can lead to confusion and detrimental outcomes for your mental state. Just as the body thrives on nutritious food for physical well-being, the mind flourishes when fed with enriching and uplifting concepts. Finally, my heartfelt thanks go out to everyone who supported me along the way. Wishing you happiness and safety always.